Be sure to go to flipsidegaming.com and use promo code 6 for 10% off on orders over $10. You can do the same at the Grizzly Gentleman for some fantastic beard products that'll make your beard look and smell great. You can also go to TCG Player using the affiliate link below and shop there to help support the show. And last but absolutely not least, go to greyvikinggames.com with the link below to get those sweet arena codes. What is up, Planeswalkers? Justin, aka Sixpack from Magic the Gathering, but you might notice we don't have an Explorer metagame. That's because Explorer, not actually a set that's been released yet. So how exactly am I going to talk about this? Easy. We're going to look at Pioneer. So, whether or not you are trying to find a deck to build for Explorer to get into the format, or if you're going to be brewing a deck, but you need to know what you're going to be facing, hopefully this video will help you somewhat. Now, I'm using MTG Goldfish. They have some decent metagame data, and they put some good stuff together, and I'll be able to kind of talk about each of these decks. Now, these are the top 10 decks that I think will be kind of the early metagame for Explorer. However, they are missing some cards, and I'm going to talk about the decks a little bit more in detail. None of these decks are in a particular order. Like, the first one's not the worst. In fact, it's probably going to be the best. This is Naya Winota. Now, Winota's a card that got banned in Historic pretty quickly, I think, if I recall correctly. And essentially, she's straight legal in Explorer. And the vast majority of the cards that are in, frankly, all of these decks, but specifically Winota, are already on Arena, right? So we don't have to really wait for much. Obviously, we don't have things like Voice of Resurgence. We don't have Mana Confluence, this Nissa here, this Domri, these Rending Volleys. But most of that doesn't matter, right? We have the main pieces. With Winota, whenever you attack with a non-human, you can get a human. This takes great advantage of the werewolves, because sometimes they're going to be non-humans. When they're flipped on their reverse side, they're not humans. So when they attack, you get to trigger Winota. But what's nice is that you can get them from the top because they are humans. Now, notably, since these are the werewolves from the newest sets, when it's night, they will enter the battlefield as non-humans, right? So you can have, a flip Brutal Cathar attacking alongside a Winota, and you could potentially hit a Tovolar's Huntmaster, which will come in as the big version. Very good, very strong. I don't believe we have Elvish Mystic, but we have Goose. Goose is an okay stand-in. And what's nice about Goose is the fact that it does have evasion, it has flying, so even though it's not going to be as consistent giving you mana after the first use of it, it is something that you can kind of freely attack with for Winota. The rest of this deck is pretty simple and straightforward. Again, we're missing Voice of Resurgence, but you can substitute kind of Patrician's Choice, whatever 2-drop you want here. These are just going to have to be very similar tech. The two Planeswalkers, they'll have to be something different, but again, like, for the vast majority, we already have this deck, and I do think it's going to be one of the strongest early builds. So if you are planning on building a Explorer deck, I definitely suggest having some removal that can get rid of Winota, as well as some cards like Grafdigger's Cage that allow you to make it so that your opponent can't cast creatures from the top. Both of those things would be very helpful, but you also have to remember your opponent can just beat you down, right? That's the good thing about Winota, is that the deck also can just curve out and kill you. You know, freaking Prosperous Innkeeper, Brutal Cathar, Esika's Chariot, Tovolar's Huntmaster. Like, those cards are just a decent mid-range shell there. Winota just makes it a lot burstier. So you do want to make sure that you can deal with both of those situations. Next deck we're going to look at is Mono Red Aggro. Now, I will say this is probably on the weaker side, just because of the fact that we don't have two incredibly important cards. Monastery Swiftspear and Eidolon of the Great Revel. Both these cards are very, very strong. Swiftspear obviously having prowess and being able to attack with haste is nice. You could theoretically get away with using the 1-mana 1/2 that when you have 2 instant sorceries in the graveyard has haste. You could get away with that. There's a bunch of other things. You could Bomat Courier in this slot. So you do have options, but Eidolon of the Great Revel is going to be a difficult card to replace. And the main reason for that is just this is a passive way of just dealing damage that really does help out Mono Red's game plan. So this deck is going to be a bit weaker than it otherwise would be, but as you can see, like, you still have a lot of essentially the rest of the cards, and you know, people have been playing Mono Red. It essentially is a pretty known entity. You know, whenever a format is around, there's probably going to be some semblance of Mono Red, be it Burn or Sly or what have you. Yeah, I mean, we have this deck for the most part, and yeah, it's just going to play out pretty normally. It's just going to try and bolt you and murder you. We have all of the sideboard stuff as well. As you can see, a ton of stuff against life gain. I'm not sure if all of this will be played, but I mean, even with just Winota, right, you have Prosperous Innkeeper. Like, you're going to have passive life gain in a decent amount of these decks. So having something like Rampaging Frostodon to bring in, even if it's only stopping like 2 points of life loss per game, that still might be sufficient to make sure that you're getting rid of your opponent here. If you're going to be sideboarding against this deck, you are still probably going to want some life gain, as well as potentially some non-targeted removal, because you don't want to hurt yourself with Bone Crusher Giants. You do maybe want to have, if you're in colors, or you can kind of afford potentially breaking on a card, something like Leyline of Serenity. Is that card legal in Explore format? I don't actually know. Leyline Serenity. Am I dumb? It's not Serenity. It is Leyline of Sanctity. Oh yeah, M20. Yeah, it's legal. So you might want something like Leyline of Sanctity, which just makes it so you can't be targeted. I'm trying to think of other colors that could help you. Or like what could help you in other colors. Green does have a decent amount of life gain stuff. Good luck if you're playing black, honestly. Because you have access to potentially Meathook Massacre, which can gain you life. The main issue with Meathook Massacre is that your opponent could just have the burn hand, right? Your opponent could just be, they hit you for like 1 actual creature damage, and then, you know, burn ya, right? I guess this isn't burn, but it gets you more burn, right? So there's that. And with blue, you have to essentially just like know what to counter, and hope, I think. Yeah. Azorius Control, for those who are scumbags. I'm looking at you, Query. I mean, again, we have essentially everything here, right? I mean, if you look through this deck, we have all these cards except for Supreme Verdict. Yeah, I mean, that's literally it. Yeah, in the main deck, that's the only thing. We have the entire sideboard as well. Yeah, I mean, this deck is kind of what it is. You know, this is just freaking historic Azorius Control, except obviously slightly different. If you're going to be playing against this, if you're going to be brewing and you want some help here, things that can be countered can be very helpful. You know, things like Chandra, the 5-mana one, as well as the Thought Distortion? I don't remember. The mono black card that yeets their stuff. Those can be helpful. But one of the things that you'll really want, as you can probably see here relatively well, is that they can't deal with creature lands all that well. They do have 2 Field of Ruins, but again, this is an 80 card deck because it is running the Yorion package. Yeah, this is, yeah. It feels like a low land count, but I guess it isn't. They do also have the Wandering Emperor, which can be annoying for that, but one of the better creature lands obviously is going to be the black one, Hive of the Eye Tyrant, because of the fact that it has Menace. So even if they do have, you know, a single Shark Typhoon token or a Wandering Emperor token, you still have a decent chance of getting around that. having access to Den of the Bugbear is also quite decent. And then the colorless one that scales, that gets bigger Crawling Barons, is also an okay option. The main issue with that is the fact that you aren't going to be able to attack through the tokens, but it is something that scales decently well into the late game. Now, going under them is also quite nice. If you're able to just have some very early aggressive attackers, especially ones that either can't be targeted or can't be destroyed, those can help. Obviously, you see here that we have Portable Hole, we have March, both of these exile, so it is going to be a little bit difficult to deal with those. But again, if something can't be targeted at all, that's going to be quite helpful at just killing them. You can also get away with using cards that tax your opponent, which you'll be seeing more of this afternoon, actually, on my stream. I'm playing Death and Taxes Explorer on stream with viewers. If you have a deck, fight me. We're testing. We're trying to be ready for Explorer. Next up is Rakdos Midrange. We are missing a decent amount of these cards, right? We don't have Kalitas. We don't have Dreadbore. Okay, I guess technically that is it. There's Raven Feeblements in the sideboard that we don't have. But that's essentially it. I mean, look, it's a mid-range deck. The reason I think this is going to be pretty decent is because this does feel like it might have some nice power against the kind of mono-red aggro deck. You'll see that it has some ways of passively gaining life with Soren's tokens, with the Graveyard Boy. But it also has, some removal as well. And I think this is going to be pretty decent against... I think it's going to have a good going first game against Azorius Control. Because again, like, if you can land one of these, it's going to be relatively difficult for your opponents to deal with. Just playing a bunch of Croxes can also be quite nice, and it does have access to the Den of the Bugbear. I'm a little surprised it doesn't run... Oh, never mind. It also has Hive the Eye Tyrant. Like, the two creature lands that I think are the best against that strategy. So, this I think is decently positioned as more of a response. Like, if we do see this, it will be changed probably a lot based upon which of these decks are actually played and how they're played. Izzet Phoenix is another deck that does... It is missing a decent amount, right? We don't have Thing in the Ice, which is a very powerful card. We don't have Treasure Cruise, which is an incredibly powerful card. Flame Blessed Bolt... I mean, it's fine. It does what it needs to do. So, we don't have all of the cards that we might need, but we do have okay replacements. You can play Crackling Drake instead. It's going to slow your deck down. Obviously, you can just go up to 4 Stormwing Entities as well. That can be helpful. Your Treasure Cruises aren't... They're not really replaceable, but you'll have to, make do with some other card draw options, potentially just up your Chart of Courses. Probably going to be the best thing that you can do here. We don't have Izzet Charm. Izzet Charm is actually super important because of the fact that it has a bunch of different modes, so you can use it to draw to get stuff. You can hit a creature, which is very helpful, and then, of course, being able to just counter something can, help you survive against Winota, or make sure that you are able to counter one of your opponent's planeswalkers that could bully you, essentially. Now, if you're playing against, or if you're going to be playing against Izzet Phoenix decks, being able to nuke their graveyard is very, very helpful. And if you have any exile removal, exiling these Phoenixes is also quite helpful. Now, the deck can be super bursty with like an early Storming Entity, and Storming Entity can rock your world, so you probably are going to want some hard removal. Things like Fateful Absence, things like, what is the name of that card? I don't remember it, man. I use it too, which is the messed up part. The Doomblade that just hurts you for 2. Also totally fine. Those types of removal spells you also might want, because Storming Entity is a little bit harder to deal with because it's a 3/3 instead of a 3/2. So you can't shock it. You'll need to like Lightning Strike it or something like that. But otherwise, just being able to completely yeet their graveyard, if you have a way to make it so they can only cast 1 spell a turn, with something like, hey, look, it's Damping Sphere. Damping Sphere. right? So I'm actually hoping that we do see some Dampening Spirit, because I really like that card as a sideboard card. But you know, yeah, if you're playing against this, you should be carrying some of that. Green probably can just use the Graveyard Hate. It does have ways of killing flyers. I don't know if that's what it wants to be doing. I mean, if you look at here, this is kind of just killing flyers. Deafening Silence also is good for this, the Naya version, anyway, the Naya deck. But you know, you have options against this, mostly just making it so that their graveyard's gone and they can't cast multiple spells. Mardu Greasefang, I think, is going to be alongside Winota as one of the stronger decks starting off, and that's just because, again, we have essentially all of these cards, if not we have all of these cards. Urborg we don't have, but that's like a non-issue really. This deck is just strong. You know, it's something that can combo you out on turn 3, right? If you get Stitcher Supplier into, you know, Dispute, or you can discard a card via some manner, and then you play Greasefang, and then you just kill your opponent, right? Being able to have a Parhelion, excuse me, on turn 3, attacking, giving you these 2 White Angels, these 2 4/4 White Angels, is devastating, right? Your opponent essentially is going to be down 5 life at 15. You're going to have a Greasefang, whatever else you had here, and you're going to have 2 freaking Angels, right? This alone, literally just this guy plus this, would be 5, plus the Angels of 8 is 13, right? You only need to deal 2 points of damage to your opponent, but they probably have already done it to themselves with their Shocklands, right? The Shocklands. Mono Red doesn't have Shocklands, but they do have Remnant Runes, which could hurt them. So, you know, shut up. We got some Shocklands. Not a ton of Shocklands, but, you know, whatever. Hey, look, we got some Shocklands. Hey, look, we got some Shocklands. So that's the thing, right? Like, your opponent is probably going to deal, like, 2 damage to themselves, so you can very easily kill your opponent, like, on turn 4, roughly, with this deck. So, I do think that this is going to be one of the bigger contenders. If you're going against this deck, removal for creatures is quite nice. You can also just have some decent artifact enchantment hate, or not enchantment, but artifact hate, being able to just destroy these before they actually get a chance to attack. Obviously, Sky Sovereign has that ETB ability, so that's going to be a bit of an issue. It's going to be able to remove one of your creatures, but the attack is a bit more devastating. So, as long as you have some sort of enchant removal, or artifact removal, maybe some creature removal, but also just graveyard hate. Right, if you're able to make it so your opponent can't actually put these cards in the graveyard, or these cards can't come from the graveyard, then you should be fine. Notably, Grafdigger's Cage, I believe, only stops creatures specifically from coming back. Graf. I hate you. Graf? Does it only have 1 F? It only has 1 F. I'm stupid. Creature cards and graveyards. Yeah. So you would need Weathered Runestone instead. Yeah, non-land permanent cards and libraries can't enter the battlefield. So yeah, so having something like Weathered Runestone, having Rest in Peace, having Scavenging Ooze. In blue, you'll just need Counterspell and or Bounce, probably. And then red, you just have artifact removal. So it has its destruction-y cards. You know, it has its sideboard options to bring in against them. But I do think this, alongside Winota, is going to be kind of the 2 main top decks. Jund Sacrifice. I mean, we have essentially this entire deck, and it currently sees play, and it's good, right? We don't have the Stormbreath dragons in the sideboard. They can be replaced. It's not the best thing to, like, we don't really have great things to replace it, because this having pro white is pretty damn annoying, honestly. Making it just so that your opponent, who's playing probably Azorius Control, not being able to hit it with a March or a Fateful Absence, or tuck it with Teferi, you know, stuff like that, means that it can just hit you very consistently. We don't have that, right? So that is going to be a potential weakness here, but the same stuff that applies to the current iterations of Jund Sacrifice apply here. Hit their graveyard hard. Potentially have some artifact removal because Witch's Oven is absolutely an issue. You can also have enchant removal because both of these cards can be an absolute issue. Besides that, counter the Mayhem Devils, counter the Corfolds, right? Notably, they have a lot of decent sideboard tech as well. So, prepare to get beaten by it. Now, 5-color humans, I put on here, not because of actual 5-color humans. I don't think 5-color humans is going to exist, because we don't have Reflector Mage, we don't have Mantis Rider, right? And those 2 cards are incredibly important for being 5 colors. So I do think it's probably just going to be white, green, and black. I think it's just going to be Abzan humans for a little bit, until we have an actual reason to bring in blue. And notice that the sideboard is also only Abzan. We don't have Tireless Tracker, but you could substitute with something probably. That just is all about gaining advantage, right? Tireless Tracker is about some onboard card advantage. We don't have Experiment 1, but you do have access to some other 1-drop humans that you can use. Giants... The Beanstalk Boy. You could have that against some of the bigger creatures, but you'll probably want something else, something a little bit more on the aggressive side, because Experiment 1 is meant to be aggressive. Obviously, you have all of these. All of these are very helpful, strong cards. Adeline is nuts and busted, and because we don't have access to Experiment 1s, we're probably going to be ending up looking at a full playset of Luminarch aspirants in the main deck, and we might even see these elite spellbinders come in to the main, replacing the Reflector Mages and replacing the Mantis Riders. That's a bit of a tough one because this does want to be aggressive, but again, we might just see another aggressive, human card at 3, like. Actually, I have no idea. I can't think of another super aggressive human card, but you're going to be wanting to have an aggressive human card, because this deck really is an aggro, like, tempo style deck that just wants to be able to beat your opponent to death while being a little bit annoying here and there. And obviously we have Collected Company, and Collected Company is a stupid card. If you're going to be playing against humans, Wraths are obviously fantastic. Just being able to destroy their entire board is very strong. If you're able to have cards that fight against Collected Company while not being bricks against an aggro draw. So, for example, Weathered Runestone. If you play Weathered Runestone on turn 2, and your opponent just curves out 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, and then like 2 2-drops or something, you're probably going to just die unless you have some other decent removal. Because that doesn't stop their creatures from hitting you, right? So you're going to want something that is able to kind of deal with Collected Company, but also, not leave you dead. And, oh crap, that's not legal, is it? No, it is. Shoot. Look, my brain is bad, okay? Containment Priest. Yeah, M21. Okay, so you could have something like Containment Priest, which can make it so that the Collected Company card whiffs, and then you can also use it to block, right? So you do have some interaction there. Obviously, you can just counter Collected Company. So if we're taking out the Reflector Mages and the Experiment 1s, we still have a decent amount of ETB cards. Third Inspector, Thalia's Lieutenant, and potentially more if Elite Spellbinder does in fact go to the main deck. Then even just having something that can just mess up ETBs, like a Hushbringer, for example, would also be helpful at fighting against them. Notably, all of the things I've talked about so far have been essentially in white, board wipes and things that can fight against this. So if you're playing a red deck, you probably just want to race them, but you'll need to, essentially, if you're playing a red deck, you're probably going to want to start early on with creatures, and then finish with your burn. So essentially the idea is try and get some of these early attacking creatures in, hitting them before they want to block or anything like that. And once you get to a point in the game where their board is starting to get large, because it does get large. Luminarch Aspirant, Thalia's Lieutenant, and Adeline both grow very, very fast, and technically Catilda can help them grow, but whatever, who cares? Then you're going to want to utilize that burn to your advantage. Now, I'm surprised that they only have Valorous Stance. Intervention was also reprinted. Heroic Int. Because that was, yeah, that was in like M21 as well, right? Yeah. So I do also expect that we might see Heroic Intervention in addition to Valorous Stance. Valorous Stance obviously can act as removal as well as indestructibility. So it makes sense that you would have that. But I wouldn't be super surprised if we saw at least one Heroic Intervention in the sideboard as well, just to help against those board wipes. Another suggestion for the main deck is now gone to me. It's a fox. It's the sacrifice. Essentially it's the dog, but a fox. It's the 2-mana one from Kamigawa. You could theoretically put that in here as well, just as another card that's kind of annoying for your opponent to deal with. I don't think this is a warrior, right? She's a knight. Yeah, so that's kind of that. Again, this is not going to be 5 colors. I do think it's going to be Abzan humans to start, and I do think Abzan humans is going to have enough replacement cards for these that it will be strong enough to be an early contender. Jeskai Fires. I hate you if you play this deck, but at the same time, we have access to 4-mana Fires, and I'm going to be using it in Bolas. By the way, again, if you want to see my Bolas Fires deck, come hang out today. We have all of these cards. Yes. Sideboard? Yes. Yeah, we have this deck full stop. Obviously, it's a deck that just wants to control the board. You have things like Air of the Gods, Sweltering Suns. I thought you had actual board wipes, but no. You have some ways to make tokens. You have the Wandering Emperor, which is a huge boon to this deck, by the way. Birth of Melodis, etc., etc. And you can sacrifice those things in order to just grab an Agent of Treachery and steal one of the things. Excuse me, this is also a Yorion build, so you can bring Yorion in, and then you flick your Agent of Treachery, and you do stupid things. Or obviously you can get this token, which allows you to make a token of a non-legendary creature. Oh, you have to sacrifice it? That's fine. It really doesn't matter, because this does not, it's not until it leaves to play. You just get to steal something. So yeah, this deck is a menace. You'll probably see it as a menace. And yeah, I mean, if you are fighting this deck, enchant removal is great. Actually, that's kind of it, man. Top of the, I guess technically Weathered Runestone is also okay, because it does stop the Transmogrify / Luca. Luca? I don't know how to say it. Luca? I'm just gonna call you Luca. It does stop that, but they could also just kill you with the Wandering Emperor. They can just kill you with Shark Typhoon. So I mean, the biggest ones really are just enchant removal, being able to yeet their enchantments. Also, hopefully making it so that they can't cast things from their deck, or put them into play, like with Transmogrify. And then potentially just having some targeted removal can help, because these are exile target creature control. Actually, I think, yeah, the way this is worded, that's part of the resolution. Maybe, I don't remember. But yeah, even having some single target removal will stop things like Transmogrify. Yeah, I think that's the main thing. And the last one, but absolutely not the least one, is Mono Black Aggro. We've seen some Mono Black Aggro in Historic. We're missing a few things. Mutavault, Bloodsoaked Champion, and then from the sideboard, Self-Inflicted Wound, and Kalitas. I do think those cards can be replaced with things. Not having Mutavault, I think, is probably going to be the biggest issue. Now, you might notice we don't really have any, what's the word I'm looking for? We don't have any tribal synergy, but Mutavault is just a very inexpensive creature land, right? And that's the main thing it has going for it. We might see this build go for Snowlands and Faithless Haven. We'll have to see, because Faithless Haven costing essentially 4 lands is way different to Mutavault essentially costing 2, right? And in a deck where you're only rocking 24 lands, you might not always be able to hit those properly. But again, as you can see, it's just a curve out deck. You know, you're going to want to play something on 1, you're going to want to play something on 2, you want to play something on 3, right? And then if you're able to finish with Rankle, pretty good for you. If you're fighting against this deck, obviously having some removal, both single target and board wipe, very helpful. If you are able to have some life gain in your deck, that can go a long way. But really, early game removal is kind of the name of the game here. Being able to just yeet their things is going to essentially help you win. You can have some creatures to block, but they do have things like Fatal Push, which they can activate pretty easily. They have Murderous Riders, they have Rankles, so just having blockers and just relying on blockers isn't always going to be the best thing for you. So, I'm trying to think if I missed what a color could do. I guess blue, if you're playing in mono, I don't think mono blue tempo is going to be very strong to start with, and that's why I didn't talk about it. There are other things on here, obviously, that I didn't talk about, either because I didn't think that they had enough cards for them, or I just generally didn't think that that they would be super competitive early on, and something that I think you should either build or watch out for. So yeah, usually blue is going to be paired with something else that can deal with it. Yeah, essentially as long as you have either white, black, or red somewhere in your color identity, you should have sufficient removal to help you, and even some life gain. Obviously the red isn't going to be super helpful, but both black and white have some passive life gain that you could potentially utilize. So those are the top 10 explorer decks that I think either you should try, or if you're going to be playing in Explorer, building your own deck, that you should definitely make sure you have access on the sideboard, even maybe in the main deck, to deal with, right? Those are the decks that I think you're going to have to look out for, because I do think that these are going to be the beginning of the Explorer format. Missing very few cards. All of them are pretty decent, tried and true strategies, honestly. So yeah, let me know what, if you're excited for Explorer, first of all. If you're going to be building one of these, which one you're going to be building and why. And if you're not building one of these, what are you going to build? I'm very curious. I'd love to know. And was this video helpful to you? I don't usually do stuff like this, so I want to know if people like it. I'm hoping that they do, because it's fun. I really like analyzing decks. Building decks is very hard for me. Analyzing them, talking about potential metagame situations, talking about lines of play and things like that, I love doing that. So yeah, let me know if you enjoyed this. I'd like to thank my lovely patrons for the continued support. If you'd like to join them and support the show, you'll find links in the description down below. You can also financially support me via becoming a channel member here on YouTube, or a Twitch sub on Twitch. All of them get the same Patreon rewards, because Patreon is just like one website, but I know not everyone wants to sign up for that. So I make it so that everyone who is either a channel member or a Twitch sub, for as long as they are those things, they get access to the Patreon rewards as well, because in my opinion, that's only fair. You can also just direct donate. I think I have a link for that if you want, I suppose. But also, like, comment, subscribe. That stuff freaking helps me out. Like, if anything else, give me a like, give me a comment. You can subscribe if you want, I guess. That's whatever. But like and comment. Those are the two helpful things. My voice is getting deeper and weirder with each passing second. Until next time.